little fun today. This is going to be interactive. We are going to go through a few slides and we're going to get into our panel presentation. We do have prizes for participation. Heckling will not be rewarded. Depends who you got home.
Can I heckle you?
Yeah, you can do that.
Come on, you're a real target.
I gotta say that we have this many people in the room. This is clearly the intelligence session. We have some of the smartest people in Illinois in this room. And while you're not at the pool bar, having a lovely drink in the sun, thank you for being here. So we will be making this collaborative because we want to learn from all of you. And there's just so much brain power in this room.
And these are also the people who didn't get flights out. So. All right, so we have the agenda on there. We're going to introduce our speakers very quickly. We're going to go through some historical info. Some of you have actually been in the room when Chris and I first did this years ago. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that law firms are doing. We're going to touch on a few things that corporate legal departments are doing, and then we're going to get into our panel. So my name is Patrick Fuller. I'm the Director of Analytics at Legal Analytics at what's now ELM Solutions, Walter Spooner Company. This is Chris Fritz. She is a principal and CRM Success Consultant for Clients First Consulting. Ramona Whitley. Ramona is the Director of Client Services at Allen Atkins. Holly Montalvo, who is the Director of Legal Analytics and heads up the law firm side for ELM Solutions. And Ann Stevenson, who is Vice President of Litigation Management at Gallagher Bassett Incorporated. So welcome. Let's get going.
That's the clicker. All right. So you might have noticed the SPY thing, right? We're doing SPY versus SPY. We originally started this presentation. We really prepared. We started in M3. And we've been working really hard on this one. I'll just see us here. Actually, though, in M3, Patrick and I worked together, and we did, I think, LJ's first presentation on competitive intelligence. I think it was the first one. And at that time, it was so new. It was really just basic education. Nobody knew what it was. No one was doing it yet. But some very smart people like Emily Gibson, they were very into it. And she sort of helped us do this initial presentation. And at the time, it was really educating people. What is this new thing in legal marketing called competitive intelligence? So Patrick and I had been to a SCIP conference, which is Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. And they told us, as in many things, we're already 15 years behind at that point. So we did another session later, and this was the third iteration of that same thing. But back in 2003, there were some very basic tools that had just come out. Courtney was out. And we were just looking at this, but we were really trying to educate what CI is, what it does, and should we be doing it, how should we be doing it, why should we be doing it, right? So we were educated, pretty much. And I don't know, Patrick, what do you think? Not really much has changed since then, do you think?
I don't think much has changed at all, except maybe what Chris and I looked like back in 2000.
You keep going to LA conferences for a period of over 10 years. This is what happens.
That was great. I just got done doing Blast from the Past, and my career was still on a trajectory upwards.
So then, fast forward ahead. We did another session in 2009, and they said we'll move forward at that point, right? So we did Mission Impossible 2. I think the Tom Cruise movie had just come out. And at this point, though, we had started using CI. It was a recognized word. People were starting to embrace it. The tools were getting better. And we started to understand that it wasn't isolated silos. The CI had to be done by groups of people who were working together on something. That we had to start focusing on relationships and where the opportunities were and how we could use this intelligence more intelligently. We got more tools that were bringing data about individuals, about companies. We were focusing on industries. We started looking at our who knows who. We got ERM systems, right? So we could figure out who knew individuals and how well they actually knew them, bringing in the competitive intelligence into the CRM systems, bringing it all together. And then, of course, the charts got tricky, which was nice. Right? So our tools got better, the charts were nice, and we had some dashboards. we've really moved ahead a few years. I think we're doing really well.
We're doing well.
So, here we are today.
So let's talk a little bit about this. And since 2003, when Chris and I first did this, to say that there's been a little bit of growth in the AmLaw 200's revenue is probably a mild understatement. From 2003 toward the last year, 49 billion to just shy of 97 billion. That's pretty considerable growth. The question is, because I'm a numbers geek, we always like to benchmark, and we're going to pick on people. I want you to raise your hand. We have great prizes, which are movies that you typically see on PBS at 3 a.m. So 10-year revenue growth. Originally, we do this in Vegas. It's legal. We can't really do it here. There's no gambling out here. But we're going to do a little over-under. So 84% revenue growth for the AmLaw 200 over a 10-year period. So let's go next. Well, I didn't quite work the way it was. Anybody want to guess what the Fortune 500? Over or under? Who says over? You can just for taking the opposite, you're getting yes. Yeah, in the last 10 years, it's pretty interesting. You know, the growth of the AmLaw 200 has actually surpassed the Fortune 500. What about Major League Baseball? Over or under? Over. Who says? Somebody raise their hand. Over. Major League Baseball actually executive revenue.
Thank you.
What about the NBA?
Under.
Who said under? Yep. Not all that's Donald Sterling's fault either. All right. What about the National Football League? Now, this puts at 84% in a little bit of a different picture, doesn't it? You know, that growth over that period is more than the NFL. It's more than the National Football League. And it really makes what Major League Baseball has done seem quite remarkable. Who wants a movie? It's called Duplicity. Julie Roberts and Todd Holmes. It's about corporate spies.
When we did the whole spy thing, I tried to get him to wear the white suit, and he wouldn't do it.
It was going to look like that character from Fantasy Island, which just was not going quite well. So part of the issue, though, is that what we've seen over the last few years, and this is courtesy of USPTO, apologize for being a little bit blurry, is that part of that revenue is, in fact, due to the increase in volume of certain types of work, right? So, you know, we see that the number of filings, patent filed with the USPTO. We look at the M&A activity, right? The great feeder profits for a lot of firms. That has continued to go up as well. But the thing that becomes really interesting here is what happens to this division of revenue. That's really what's driving a lot of all this intelligence gathering. You look at the revenue of the AmLaw Top 50 over the last 10 years, actually the last 12 years, and it's gone from almost that 50-50 split to almost a 60-40 split. And there's reasons for that. There's consolidation at the top. There's mergers that played into that, obviously. But that's a little bit of a concern. Whenever you have a math like the bottom 150, 75% getting a decreasing share of an decreasing market, a rapidly decreasing market, that can become a little bit of an issue. So let's talk about how law firms are looking at this.
So this is a particular area of interest for me, is sort of where CI is headed going forward. It's something that we care a lot about. Moving forward, we now are thinking about intelligence in a much more holistic way. So it's not all about, it's moved from, hey, this is not, something secret, and it's actually something that corporations have been doing for years. It's completely, something that we all should be doing. But now we're looking at a lot more sort of silos of data that we need to bring together to make the decisions. So we have to look at not just external intelligence on industries, on competitors in our our clients in the market, but also internal data, so our financial information to figure out where's that white space or that green space that we are interested in. Where are our relationships the strongest? Where are we doing the right things with pricing, our financial information? And then we're also now so inundated with social intelligence, so we've got tools like Manzana, so we can listen to all of the information that we're being inundated with. And it's really challenging to put all this information to make a good decision, and that's what it's really all about. How to make a decision. This is all just nice to know if there's not a decision to be made. Boy, we found out that there are a lot more decisions you can make, right? So before it was just, which one should we go after or might we win? But now it's actually informing, should we even be interested in pitching? Where should we be opening offices? Which lawyer should we hire? Do they really have a book of business? Is it really going to come with them? A lot of firms have bet a lot of time and effort on that and been burned. It has really now become part of our strategic planning process as it should be. And these are all the things that we're now doing with CI. In your firms, how many of you are actively encouraging competitive intelligence? How many of you have an internal person full-time that does nothing but competitive intelligence? Leave your hands up. Anybody who also has maybe has a part-time person. I mean, look around the room. So, now your competitors are all doing this, for law firms. So what competitors are doing is somebody ramps up explanation. But it's really important to understand that our competitors are doing this. This is important information. Who's handling it? So my team did some research on this a couple of years ago. So we found out it's being done in a lot of places. It used to be the library. Some firms still is. Oftentimes now we're having librarians who are becoming part of the marketing department. Just like our new job of legal marketing technologist is being created, these marketing technology analyst type positions are being created, these intelligence positions. And the library is working as part of that, or they're actually hiring. Yes.
I'm sorry, are these slides in back from your CFI?
They should be.
They are.
We could have been doing something.
I just did it. Thank you.
I'll guarantee you. I know where you live. I guarantee you. They were on
Did you just say you know where she lives?
I had to tell us.
Great. So we're talking about CI, and you go one molecule away from the start.
So more and more, it is becoming, this is becoming a job function within the marketing department. We found that there is, as with many things, there is no one answer. It's all over the board. Some firms have a KM department. We also found there are really, really small and mid-sized firms that have one or even two dedicated people, and there are large firms doing nothing. It's amazing. It's all over the board. But we have over a period of time, as you can see, in 2003, nobody would raise their hands in the church. So, here's some of the tools. We're not going to beat this because you've probably seen these a million times. Just in the last couple of years, we've had new tools that aren't even on this slide yet. All sides out there. Have you seen any interesting tools for intelligence? Yes.
I don't know if anybody talked about audit analytics,
Audit analytics.
but that was an interesting one. A little bit similar to Capital IQ. Looks like it had a nice interface. Certainly worth looking at. They offer public company information.
Thank you for that piece of intelligence. You have the voice disguise.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wish you would give this to me before I was meeting.
And so we all learn from each other. If you haven't checked out the people who are in the service provider and partner organization, absolutely do so. They've got some amazing stuff over there, and it changes every year. So what are we doing with this intelligence and information within the law firm? It's going with some basic reports, and sometimes they're still, pulling those basic reports and just, doing a quick task and capture to get out the door. All the way up to really strategic. I had someone tell me, for the right piece of intelligence, I'll pay $5,000 for that one report to guide a decision that helps actually get a piece of business. All right, so that's incredibly valuable. All the way down to the basics for tax and capital reports that we need because the attorneys are, everything's got our closing company by 11 at 9. That request comes in. The beauty is these tools make it easier to get that information. The other thing that we don't see much of is primary research. So people actually picking up the phone and making some phone calls. And I wonder where that's all. Interesting stuff. Now we're going to actually have someone who's in-house, in the field, doing this sort of information and gathering and research.
So the next few slides just take a look at one way you can compile your reports, or one way you might look at and approach them. What you're just looking at up on the screen right there is, this is an index, or the kind of the agenda page of company research reports that we put together at Allen Matkins. This one is pretty wide scoping. It's a deep dive on a company. We have an executive overview. We take a look at the background on the company. For us, because we're real estate focused, we spend a lot of time looking at the deals or the portfolios that companies have into their mix. We're looking at things like the recent news, the legal decision makers, the relationships that we have with the company. We're pulling those outside litigation reports. We're going into the media, Law 360, trying to find out who else they're using for counsel. And then we kind of turn them inward as well. We're taking a look at the revenue trends, et cetera, that are going on and where we're going if it's a current client for us. And just continuing that same theme, and as if we were going through that whole deep dive or dossier on a company, we open it up with our executive overview. For us, the kind of the three most important things, especially if it's an existing client, are what is the work we're doing today, and what can we do that we should be doing? So what are the opportunities? And if it's not an existing client, just what are our opportunities and what's our way to get in the door? We always want to have a quick look at the revenue trend. Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Is it kind of all over the board? And then thirdly, on that overview page, where are those really deep, meaningful relationships? Who are we connected to and how are we connected to them? So it won't be everybody we know at the company, but it's those 2 or 3 people that are driving maybe the decisions, and in some cases, just one person. For those of you that are using ContactNet, we always include that type of a report. Again, we do some customizing around it. We just pull what's relevant off of it. We might add a few fields into it, but we're looking again for those relationships that are most meaningful to us, and who knows who type report. Again, many of us have access to our litigation reports. We happen to use Advantage, but we also augment that with CourtLink and Pacer because they cover different courts. They're looking at different things. We know we can get a better and more well-rounded profile if we pull from a couple of different sources. So we kind of put that all in together, make our own little report off of it for the competitive analysis. Another area that we do a deep dive on is we kind of blow out the other competitors or people that are currently serving their legal needs. So we'll go do a little bit of extra research around them. This isn't a push the button report. This is I've read a lot of stuff on it. I pulled things from a lot of different sources, and we're kind of compiling it together for what's most helpful for us. And then the last section that we have in there, of course, is our internal revenue. If they are already an existing client, we look at 4 or 5 key pieces of data around it. We're looking at the revenue trend, but we're also looking at the MATA reports and pulling them and seeing exactly what we've done. We're looking at the trends in the working attorney reports. I kind of want to see where the numbers are, who's going up, who's going down, what major departments are responsible for that. Of course, we look at the realization, or if you have a profitability metrics, you want to include that inside of it as well. And if they've got any kind of a special pricing deal, because we're really trying to understand the pricing behind this client too, and where they're at and what we should be doing with them. So that's just a snapshot from inside a law firm.
Questions? Great.
How long do you ask for a timeline to be able to do that for?
Oh gosh. Something like that, we would at least want a good 4 or 5 days on it. And we do have a freelance researcher that we work with. So she sometimes can work into the evenings. More often than not, if somebody needs it really quickly, we'll pick up the phone, we'll have a more meaningful conversation with them about what is it you really need and by when, because we can't get it all for you, but this is what I can give you in the time frame that you've got. And so once we can understand the goals and the time frame together, we can merge something. But something like that, we would want a good week on it.
So you have a freelance person. Anybody doing freelance people outsourcing this function? 1, 2?
Yeah. And it's just a good starting point. We look at those reports when they come back in, and, because our internal team, we're the folks that are calling the attorneys and talking to them about the client too and where the opportunities are. And there's a lot of times people, I think, forget that piece of weaving it into the report. Your best intelligence is going to be coming from some of your own attorneys that maybe already know a little bit about the company or are already working with them. And so you want to weave that around what you're getting from outside.
Yes.
So.
Related to that, then using a freelancer, what about internal metrics like the, accounting and that sort of thing? Is that information that's proprietary and you add it afterwards, or do they actually have access to that?
Our freelancer does not have access to that. That is something that the marketing team or the client development team will pull themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you incorporate the information from client service interviews?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we've done some client service interviews, they're usually in between there. There's some kind of a SWOT analysis. We don't technically use the grid, but we just go over the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, and they're laid out in there. And those typically, oftentimes, you can pull those out of the client review.
I mean, that's the big piece of it. When we do these reports, we will pull out legal issues and opportunities. Because you know the lawyers, they spend sometimes 5 minutes reading these reports that took hours to prepare. You know, if you can pull out just the key issues that you're going to spend 5 minutes hyperlinking them throughout the report, this is what we should have a conversation about because this is what they care about. Make it easy for them.
Chris, I had a question from your experience, or all of you, if you don't mind. So remember, you just went through from 2003 to now. One of the things I keep hearing from managing partners is, what a waste of money. They don't see the cost benefits. So I'm wondering how many of you are tracking time and cost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how much is the competitive intelligence cost? How much is the time and money versus revenue? Is that what doing that, you know?
If they're doing this right and they actually see it work, they'll get business out of it and you'll never have that question again. There's an education piece to this that is so crucial. Hand you what you have to do when they ask for them. But the goal should be to actually have a consultative session with them by someone in the marketing department or your analyst to really educate them as to, here's what it is, and here's the summary, here's what it means. It means when you go to that meeting, you need to take these 2 other lawyers with you because you don't know what's talking about, this is what's really relevant to them. And sometimes they don't know that. They need us to help them. That's what we do.
Well, I think the other thing too is that I think that the term gets watered down and has gotten watered down somewhat over time to where people confuse commoditized information with competitive intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you just, or client information or whatever, so if you're just getting something on who's doing the work for so-and-so and, you know, what the revenue is and everything else, okay, that's fine. But for example, if you've got a firm that's moving in to, you know, establishing an office in your city, for example, and you know you want to be able to take your top 100 clients and be able to figure out of those top 100 who's that firm also represent and in which other markets, you know, what talent might be at risk from your firm. I don't know very many managing partners that would look at that and go, yeah, it's a waste of time. We don't, you know, we can lead talent and lose clients. That's not a big deal.
Right. Also remember, lawyers typically are very detail oriented. They're not necessarily, they're not all, but most of them are not necessarily strategic big picture thinkers. So sometimes it's really helpful if you can, this is what you're saying, this is what it means. And then you stop having those questions as to whether this is relevant because it's incredibly relevant.
That's where you go get the non-lawyer. All right, how many people are at the session at the GC panel this morning? How many people thought that they talked a lot about cost? How many times there was a drinking game about that was going on? So the interesting thing that we saw is that, you know, we see a lot of information from the law firm perspective, focusing on relationships, right? And we're focusing on, you know, what type of work they're doing, where's the work coming from, which other firms are doing the work. Let's take a look at what the in-house legal departments are doing, what they're measuring. And we're not going to go into a ton of these because there's a lot of these, but I want to give you just an example. And this is one example right here. This is real data. We changed some of the information, some of the names and everything else. But this is somebody that was a client that was looking at work being done, specific tasks, by timekeepers that were at one point associates, now partners. So they established a price point of X. That price point is now Y. The efficiency hasn't improved, but their spend has gone up. And they're digging through their data, finding these areas because they realize, well, wait a second, we were paying $300 an hour for that. Now it's $600 an hour. We don't want to keep paying $300 or $600 an hour for that. So this is just, you know, one example. There's a lot of these where they're going through and reading through their billing, and those are the metrics that they're really measuring.
I'm not gonna heckle. I'm gonna ask you something.
Sure.
My vision sucks. So I think this is blurry.
It might be.
It's not just me. Okay.
I was reading when I put it together,
Okay.
and
It looks good. Done.
It looks better on the computer.
this
It
is
looks better on that. I'm certain I'm just learning about the projector. It's just
the pyramid projector. This is an example here looking at other one. Anybody familiar familiar with that term? So upbilling is when things round down to the half hour or up to the full hour. And, on the 10-point scale, there you go. No more than 20% of that work on the law statistical average should be coming up that way. So when you start seeing timekeepers who have 100% of everything ending on a half hour or the full hour, you're looking at, 1,400 line items that are coming up perfectly to a half hour or a full hour. That's going to raise a lot of red flags for clients. What they started doing is actually calculating that cost. And there are a few that are out there that are taking it a step further and looking at where the rates are that they're paying relative to the market benchmarks and extending out that cost as well too. So this is what your in-house legal departments, your clients, are looking at.
How are they doing this? They have somebody just manually going through this? There's no product for them yet, right?
No, there is. Yeah. Well, I don't. There's about 5 companies that sell stuff like that. It's all this stuff can be done through the e-learning management system.
Right. So then it's scary because it's easy for them to do this.
It's not necessarily easy, it's easier, yes. It's not time intensive. So another example here is 10th hour billing, sprinkler billing. And a lot of times what you end up seeing, what they look at is bills that were put through for a 1/10 of an hour, and the task, typically takes 2 hours to 3 hours to do, right? So it's kind of impossible to be able to look, to do a task in a 1/10 of an hour, when typically that task takes 3 hours.
So Patrick, what's that about then? I mean, what, are they just,
It could be nothing.
touch on it, or?
It could be nothing. What they end up looking at, though, Linda, is an aggregate. So it's like looking at your end of the year credit card statement. They'll look at it over a wide period of time, and they'll see percentage of 0.1s as total line items. And that'll be a red flag they'll go back and talk to the firm about.
I just have a practical suggestion. If you don't know this at your firm, you might want to ask your people like your Royal Leave or your China Billing System, say, do we have like Serengeti at our firm? Because that's what a lot of outside clients are using. And Serengeti will actually let your firm buy it too, so that you can do it parallel. And that's actually, a couple firms are doing that. It's really smart because they're able to benchmark themselves and the client can come to you. You can say, I know my averages and I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and same thing with block billing. Putting a lot of characters, a lot of descriptions and everything to where they can't manage it. They can't break out the tasks. That's something that's tracked a lot. It's more of a foundational metric. Duplicate line items, descriptions. These things take multiple calls and email. And there's 100 or 200 of those. Where it's not tied back to a specific matter. Those are things that are going to get flagged, and that comes back into evaluation too. And then, of course, benchmarking is a big thing. You heard about it today. This is going on quite a bit. I think a lot of it too, and we'll talk probably a little bit more about this, is firms with lower cost offices and lower cost markets. And some of you in here have experienced this. The conversations are coming now where they want to force that work down within your firm to those lower cost markets where they can. And so this is just another example of how some of the screens look when you're looking at this. This is one that actually looks at staffing along with the rates and the total matter and fee cost by time. And all these are available for you in the app as well. And then just one final thing here. This is actually looking at an AFA. I refuse to call it value-based. Until somebody can define value, sorry, we're going to go with AFA. But this is looking at staffing ratios on similar matters, the same types of matters at the same firm, and how they staff them on an hourly basis versus how they staff them on an AFA. So different things that clients are looking at. Just fill out capability and all that, these things. So we got through this in 30 minutes because we're setting up the rock stars. Took us a while to get there. Any questions before we move into the panel questions?
Yes, the other thing that common theme that I heard this morning was the cost, but also the quality of work. So where is the measurement of the quality component, or are you just measuring staffing and pricing?
Well, the hard part is that we have that conversation with people on a regular basis. is it's all subjective. In a lot of cases, if we will see end matter evaluations, for example, where everything is great and they say, we hired from again, it's one of the questions, we hired this lawyer again, it's one of the questions, it's nothing. Or we'll see things that are just, middle of the road, and it's yes. When we talk about the quality of the work, on litigation matters, we'll do what's in it. We're trying to figure out what you consider to be a success and what you consider not to be a success. Point being that every client's a little bit different, every company's a little bit different. You can speak to this as well. Judy, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'm with Gallagher Bassett. We're a third-party administrator. Historically, decisions were made for law firms primarily through relationships our clients have with those law firms. That as our clients are tasking us more and more with outcome-based performance and outcome ultimately to them being getting that claim settled faster for less money, we are starting to incorporate a lot of additional tools to help us to identify law firms, identify outcomes, things of that nature. It's a challenge. The primary focus today is on rates. Who's going to do it? Who's spending less time? But as we progress, we really are looking for more qualitative analysis, law firm scorecards. And one of the things that we want to do with that is with our claim adjusters, in addition to asking them to complete those scorecards when a matter settles, or if it's a long-term matter, maybe on an anniversary date, we're also going to be looking at our teams to see whether we have a really good relationship between an adjuster and an attorney, and they get a 5 on everything, even though we can see that the durations are longer, that the settlement is higher. So that's an area where there is a lot of opportunity for growth, I think, as an insurance industry, particularly within a claims organization. We're at the forefront of that. I think others are going to be going in that direction. Carriers have been doing it internally a little bit better because it's their money, but they also get to direct and exactly determine who and when and how an attorney is going to be assigned.
I would also say, to Patrick's point, I'm Holly Montalvo with Vulture's ELM Solutions, and I work exclusively with law firms on analytics, looking at benchmark data. And a lot of it goes to the LPM side of it, process management, building budgets, and it goes back to scope. When is a win a win? The client might say, here's the matter, and the firm goes off to their side of the fence, and hey, we billed ours, the case went to trial, and we won. And really, in the best interest of the client, you've got to have that alignment back to what the goal is of the client. And that's hard to put a number or a metric to, but there is, we are starting to see more and more capture in that area. It's more subjective, but as that alignment between what you heard at the panel this morning, I saw the big board out there, so much of that starts to say, yeah, there's data, there's information, there's benchmarks, but there's got to be some collaboration, and there's got to be back to the process of what is the goal of the client. And if your attorneys are not having that kind of conversation and you're not starting to capture that information, because that data and information that you take from that relationship attorney, if you start doing some processes to better capture that and memorialize that and say, we're building this proposal. We came up with this. We built a budget. We tried to manage it. How did that go? Where did the wheels fall off? What went well? What didn't go well? You're going to start to see some patterns. And the one piece I try to talk with the partners about is it doesn't have to be perfect. Every matter is different. There's complexity, there's exposure. But you can't go for perfect because you'll be paralyzed. There'll be no decision. You don't know where to go next. So if you start to look at some of the data and information directionally, you can start seeing some of those best practices as the market starts to get more and more capture on that side. To your point, there needs to be a little bit more behind that, but it can't be, unfortunately, sometimes that capture is left in the attorney's head, and it doesn't get captured so that you can look and say, yeah, in the post-interview, things didn't go well. The attorney told me it went well, and then we look at, we're not getting calls from the client, there's a gap there. And so kind of identifying some of that and realizing that it's not going to be perfect, it's kind of a work in progress, but really trying to engage more with the attorneys that are speaking and handling those relationships with the outside corporate client is going to help as you try to get that, maybe through an experience database, maybe it's through post-exit interviews. And to Patrick's point, we're starting to capture, looking to capture more and more to give some directional information in that area. But it's a tough area.
Yes, I'll just add, you mentioned collaboration a few times, and certainly from a claims perspective, our adjusters have a relationship with the attorney. The attorney or the firm may have the relationship with the client, but the client really is looking at us as their fiduciary and how that claim is going and how it's resolved and the timeliness of it. So that collaboration and the information that is being exchanged between the client and the attorney, or the attorney and the adjuster, if that isn't memorialized someplace in a concise manner where folks can get to it, it really does take away from the effectiveness that you might actually be providing. There's question. If reports are getting late, if recommendations are being late, hearing notices, if there's not timely action and visible action that we can share with the clients, then all of a sudden something that you may be doing really well is looked upon as you're not delivering for us like we need you to.
All right, so, can't believe I ever used the microphone. So we've seen some examples of law firms. We've seen some examples from the corporate legal perspective. Would anybody think that they're aligned? No answers. We have 2 movies out. Nobody wants them. So I think this is interesting, and you bled into it a little bit. I want to ask you about this because one thing Gallagher Bassett does exceedingly well is predictive analytics. They've got one of the best analytics teams I've ever seen and had the chance to work with. But claims organizations have to be a hybrid of the physical and the market and the predictive. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys approach that?
Yeah, and I mentioned it a little bit. Historically, the firms that we worked with were primarily directed by the clients, and for the most part, they still are. But our clients are absolutely expecting that we continually to deliver the financial results that they're looking for. And when I say financial results, it's certainly much more than that. We represent companies that have injured workers, that have injured a third party, that have reputational risk, and all sorts of other things go along, just as you all do. So as I talk about financial results, that's very rarely at the expense of delivering the right outcome for that injured party. That is first and foremost for the majority of our clients. Some certainly are just looking at the almighty dollar. So as they're saying, these are the firms that I want you to work with, they are still looking to us to manage the overall process and to help manage the outcomes. And they're expecting to come to us. And I will tell you what for a TPA, what can really kill us is when we have a client contact that is directing something, we're not providing information about the quality of the work effort of their selected partners. That person leaves, and all of a sudden our entire program is at risk because somebody new comes in that has other forms of intelligence, that has other relationships, and we can't justify why we've allowed this partner or this organization to continue to underperform compared to peers. So we are constantly looking at what sort of information do we have, how can we demonstrate to a client where there are good results, where there is a good partnership, what can we do to educate our client if it's a good partner but the results aren't quite there, how can we facilitate meetings to have a better understanding and make sure that we're all working towards mutual goals. And if there is a sacred cow, and we certainly have sacred cows, how can we get that information to a client that they can then determine whether or not they want to do anything about it. But when there is a change, it's no longer Gallagher Bassett that has been failing to deliver for the client.
Holly, one of the probably the newest position in a lot of law firms, especially with the last 5 to say 6 years, but really in recent years, has been the chief pricing officer, the strategic pricing officer, ties in with project management with some firms as well too. And historically, we've all run into situations in firms where there's silos inside the firm where we have a hard time working with some of those other functions. Can you take me through how they're working with all these different departments in the firm from your perspective?
And that type of a role, the pricing, sometimes there's different titles. It might be strategy pricing, legal project management. I've seen all variations, and those tend to be a lot of the folks that I work with every day. And that role, starting back 5-6 years ago, there were a handful. Now that group is up to upwards of 150 plus. So that pricing role was a reaction in the market on the corporate side to procurement, legal ops, saying, we want these AFAs, stricter billing guidelines. You need to be able to demonstrate budgets that are transparent and predictable. And so instead of the role being just marketing would build the RFP, they'd go to finance and ask for the numbers to slide in. Now you're being asked for this whole new hybrid. What is an AFA? I've heard it called an appropriate fee. I've heard it called an alternative fee. I've heard it called, all sorts of variations. It's evolving. And so the pricing professionals started to evolve in response to the demand coming from the corporate legal departments. And they needed to have a different set of skills. They couldn't come in, you don't want a legal person, you necessarily don't want predominantly somebody within the firm. You didn't have that skill set because just an accounting person might not have that analysis background and that strategy. So this pricing role evolved. And what's interesting about it is every firm I go to, the firms that don't have that function, while we begin conversations within the next 3 to 4 months, if I've come in to work with them, oh, we've got somebody coming in, and I'll say, what's their role? Pricing manager, or pricing professional, or pricing. Some have been elevated to chief roles. This role is growing in importance, and I think, to Patrick's point, how they're interacting within the firm is key because they're kind of on that front line working with the attorneys, working with marketing that are trying to put the pitch together. Maybe it's an RFP, maybe it's an existing client that's asking you for pricing, locking into a couple-year deal. What's interesting is that role kind of has tentacles through the lifeline of the firm. It's the new business. It's the client that's calling that's asking for something. So that pricing professional, as they're starting to figure out the dotted lines, I would suggest to all in this room, the more and more you get into those conversations with that type of function within the firm is going to help you because the business development, I think, is the linchpin piece. I work with a lot of the financial analysts, a lot of the pricing people have strong analysis background, but you in the marketing and business development realm can take that information. You don't have to be a financial analyst. I'm not. I formerly was at Winston & Strawn as a business development analyst. I can look at the data and you're going to be able to start to see some patterns that maybe the finance department isn't seeing. Your managing partners and your relationship partners, they're not going to look at those regression models and go, oh, I think we need to cross-sell in the IP patent area in this market. This is a golden opportunity for the marketing function to take in some of the information, as that emerging role is growing, there's more and more data out there to analyze. Find the hot spots. Figure out where there's some correlation. It doesn't have to be perfect, but don't run from it. And then empower the attorneys because the attorneys, they look at a pivot table and their eyes glaze. I've sat in meetings with partners and they said, I didn't go to law school to try to, to be a financial analyst or a legal project manager. There's a gap there. And I think the BD component can help that learning curve to empower them where it's not scary. Maybe take 3 or 4 charts, kind of the things that Patrick's shown with some of those revenue charts, show them some key areas, and then say, what do you think? Give them some options. So really, I see that increasing role at the firms, having a dotted line over to marketing, being really key. Because if those two functions can align, you can empower the attorneys to be focused on what it is they do well, but not be so afraid to have those conversations with their outside counsel. You want a flat fee. Well, tell me why. Well, we're worried about exposure. Well, what else? Really try to dig into what the client goal is. You have the supporting documentation with them in their briefcase so that if it gets to that point, you don't want to get into just a rate game or a negotiation game 2/3 down the road because you've blown through your budget. So this is where I think that pricing function and the marketing function can really be on the front end of growing the revenues at the firm.
Yeah, one of the key things that all lawyers share, sort of the corollary for law school, is math price. So we're right back to the value of the marketers and making sure that we're educated about the numbers and that we can quickly come in and say, here's the data, this is what it means. That's what our value really is. We also want to make sure that you all get value out of this session. Anybody who knows Patrick and I, we can talk all day, but we don't want to. We want you to ask questions. So we have more goodies to give away. Yeah.
You like Julia Roberts? You have no choice. Julia Roberts or Leslie Nielsen.
Give it duplicity, I've seen it already.
And why you're seeing it again.
What's your question?
So here's my question. So it seems like at the beginning of your presentation, you spoke about the competitive intelligence that law firms focus on. And most of that stuff is more or less publicly available. Things like where companies are, what sort of litigation they have, what sort of mergers they're involved in. It's information that's available. The information, the big data that the in-house counsel is looking at is comparing how our lawyers' budget and price matters, and can compare it to other firms they use to see who's being efficient, who's being not. My question is, do you anticipate any sort of technology coming out where lawyers will be able to get that information that the in-house counsel has? So lawyers can say, well, this company got sued, and we know that we would price, looking at it with our lawyers, we would price this case as X. But we know that they use firms that price that same as Y, and that's what they're used to getting. So if we're going to go and pitch them, we have to be very mindful of that. Do you anticipate any sort of technology like that coming out?
Well, actually, it's not necessarily a technology.
Yeah.
That information exists, and that's what I work with firms. We have that market data to share with the law firms. And so when, Wolters Kluwer Timetrics started its infancy on the e-billing side, it was to the corporate legal department that was trying to rein in, we don't know where we're spending, we can't look at paper invoices, so we need it electronic. And so what happened is when the recession hit, the corporate legal department started asking for different things. Instead of saying, here's our spend, here's the firms we're going to, they started to say, we want to compare ourselves to our other peers. So I'm an insurance company, or I'm a bank, or a telecom. They started contributing their legal spend, which is that line item invoice detail for the matters. It's a product liability. It's it's taking place in the Midwest. It lasts this long. It costs this much. Here are the rates. Here's the profile of the firm. We started collecting that data back about in 2008. Our company has now $65 billion in legal spend. And what we did was we anonymized it because we saw that there was two partners in this. So we take that legal spend and we take off the company name and we replace it with industry value. We take off the law firm name. We replace it with the rank of the firm and the size of the firm. We keep all the metadata around the matter, the timekeeper, years of experience, the phase and task, and we now have that benchmarked. And that's what I work with firms, to give you that insight so that you can say, this is how we're performing, and now let's see what's clearing market for a similar type matter as that, to give them that insight.
And most of the corporations, that the clients you're working with, regardless of what ELM provider they have, not just Timetrics, they have that information. But all the other ELM providers have a lot of that benchmarking as well. So they are looking at what you have a trade software practice area in this location. And they are negotiating with you, the law firm, as many of you have probably experienced, that's where a lot of AFAs come and things of that nature. So they have the information. So yes, it would definitely be easy to also have that information.
If you're early on the curve in this, though, sir, the best thing to do is ask the person in charge, your chief financial officer, say, what is our time billing system? The majority of the law firms in the market use a lead. Now, what I would recommend, which many firms do, is you start with a pilot. Have a discussion with your CFO. Say, you need to start tracking averages. So, for example, if you're doing a lot of securities arbitration work, let's start tracking the securities arbitration averages. All they need to do is work with your elite representative, and they'll write an algorithm or a report that customizes the lead, and we'll be able to get you there. So that's sort of a practical way. Yes, you can use an outsider benchmark, but really all of us should be doing it internally as well in sort of a parallel manner, in my opinion.
Many of our larger clients have legal summits, and I don't know how many of your clients have those sorts of things where they bring on all their counsel on an annual basis, easy for me to say, to talk about changes in their program, but a lot of them are starting to share the performance. Some of them have talked about they list every firm by name. Here's what you've done, here's your performance, here's what your billing looks like. So whether they're doing summits or not, certainly asking your client if they do measures of their firms and how your firm ranks, where your strengths are, where they're looking for improvement from you is another way, if you don't have all that benchmarking information, to find out really how you stack up for that client.
And I didn't show this, but I think you guys actually track this, and that's burn rates. Don't you? So you guys will track burn rates.
Aren't we?
Yes. But, yeah.
Right, and that is certainly one of the things. Budgets are still fairly new to our industry, legal budgets. And so as we turned on our program, we have a matter management system, legal bill review. We are requiring budgets in there. It's new to some of our firms. It's definitely new to some of our adjusters. So I have seen just block budgets where every matter that firm handles is a $6,500 budget. I've seen others where they put $25,000 so they can get their invoices processed. That doesn't do any good for our client, who's ultimately the user of that budget information. They need to understand what their defense exposure is for a given period of time and how effectively you, as the firm representing them, are estimating what that is, that budget is, that spend is, for the strategy that's been employed, how quickly you're burning through that. Was that budget appropriate? Was the budget lowballed because you wanted to get the assignment? Was that budget put in high so that you never had to worry about an invoice being rejected? I've seen practices where they put a trial on every single matter. Well, most don't go to trial. Most were trying to get settled. They're admitted injuries, they're known exposures. Let's try to get it resolved efficiently, quickly, and a good resolution. So all of those things, and the burn rate is certainly one of those things that we'll be looking at, as well as just as we do in the claims industry overall, stair-stepping of budgets. The facts are going to change in a case, adjustments are going to be needed, but if it's consistently that the budgets are up and down with a given attorney, a given matter, a given firm, that's where we're going to have some additional conversation.
We had a question. Yeah, I want to make sure we get to it here.
What are the best resources for private or closely held companies for health and salary? I've been struggling with this for a while.
Money and shady people.
Well, better call Saul, he might know.
That's a challenge for a lot of organizations, and that's where you almost have to be reliant upon the relationships and social intelligence and relationships. Who knows whom that can provide some information, because trying to get information online on any privately held company is very, very difficult.
No.
No, their websites are terrible, so it's not even like you can go to, and there's a board of directors and a 10K.
Yeah, we've struggled with that too. I think the best tactic is if you've got people with relationships is to talk to them. The next thing is to go to turn to social media, even Twitter and stuff, because people will talk about stuff. You know, just you're looking for nuggets at that point, right? And depending on how big the company is, if it's fairly big, somebody like the Wall Street Journal might have profiled them at some point, and you can sometimes glean good data off of some of their company profiles or the Bloomberg profiles. They won't be anywhere as robust, but it's about the best you can do with it.
And sometimes local newspapers will provide coverage.
Business journals. Local business journals pull a lot
So what
down.
you're saying is that you wish that there was 200 private corporations that would willingly submit their own financial data to be ranked in some sort of publication every year?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
We should try that legal. Yeah.
The thing about primary is a little bit, and I actually, there's one thing I want to know about it. I just ask questions as much as, without trying too much.
Right.
Just ask what you want to know. Usually they're good forthcoming.
You know, you bring up something interesting. We tend to not talk to people anymore. We tend to want to go to a site, and you're exactly right. You might have somebody that you call that's so taken aback by getting a call and questions that they might, in fact, be more willing to share.
One of the CI analysts on my team, he had a request from the law firm. Can you find for me, and let's talk esoteric, any information on who the experts are on high-end, ultra-luxury nursing homes in China? And he loves this. He picked up the phone. He found 3 professors at academic institutions in the U.S. who were tied into this market, and they were so excited because they didn't get a lot of phone calls. They were ready to talk to this lawyer. I mean, he was going to be introduced. He just didn't care. He dropped the ball and never called. It just amazes me what's happening. People love to talk. Especially if they're the experts. So,
Well, one thing that I forget, you're already at a no. So asking the question, the worst you're going to get is a no, which you started with, but you make it something better than a no. So that's a really good point.
And one thing you should be aware of is the SCIP guidelines, ethics guidelines. So I want to make sure that I was familiar with the people that's on, just knowing what I can do.
Right.
and you can always pick up the phone and call Elevate Resources. People in this room will give you ideas. Ramona and I always do all that, what information I'm looking at, or you found a good place for that.
Speaking of great resources, there's a question here from Marcy.
Oh, it wasn't a question. It was actually going to follow on what Chris said in response to the question, which is one source of information or way to access information about private companies that is yet to be widely adopted by legal is primary research. And primary research, it means essentially you hire a firm to make phone calls and do research with the target companies that you want to do business with. There are a couple of providers, I guess, in the industry. There's Architas and BTI, both of whom do primary research, but it is certainly an area that I foresee will continue to grow.
Yeah.
And you get, let's see.
I'm
Two things, yay, rockstar.
All right, so we got one final question here, and just don't want to get on this. Who here is familiar with Google? It's ironic, when I did that slide with the comparisons of revenue, I actually looked at Google because they only have like $170 or so thousand in revenue in 2003.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the NFL commission only made $6 million that year too, and now he made $44 million this last year. So some people, like Google, they kind of went off the charts. But there's a quote, I'm going to read this here, so my apologies. Eric Schmidt from Google. You guys, some of you have heard this or seen this. From the dawn of civilization until 2003, humankind generated 5 exabytes of data. Now we produce 5 exabytes every 2 days with a pace that is rapidly accelerating. So we're already overwhelmed by some degree to the amount of data that we've got to comb through. We used to refer to it as finding a digital needle in an infinite haystack. And now we're going to continue to get more data.
And our brains are not processing any data, we won't even learn.
Yeah. So Ramona, how are we going to deal with this?
Okay, so I think where the trend is going as analysts, we spend an inordinate amount of our time just taking the data and putting them in formats where we can make sense of it. Whether you're a high-end big company that's doing a lot of predictive analytics, or whether you're smaller like Allen Meckens and you get 10 different spreadsheets and you're sorting them and you're using pivot tables and stuff. I think the way it's all going to come together is there's going to be a lot of new startup companies that are just dealing with taking vast amounts of data and getting them in quickly into formats that really analytical people can use, the analysis piece. So I think there's going to be more time spent on that. Any of you that live up in the Bay Area, I don't know if you've ever went to any of the Salesforce meetups, where they are talking with a lot of the startup companies that come in and they do 15-minute demos. So a couple of months ago, I was up there and sat in just a 15-minute demonstration of the company called Plexata. And what they do a couple of different things, but what their claim to fame is you can take a plethora of Excel spreadsheets, and they've encountered a lot of different scenarios, like how to get things from caps to this, how to get the out of something really quickly, where you can do it in Excel, but you're pushing a lot of buttons and trying to make it talk, or you're trying to do it in Access and make things talk. It's very intuitive, and a lot of it's done behind the scenes. And so you can run it, and you can get your spreadsheets and everything real quickly in a format that you want. There's another company out there, some of you may have already used it, Tableau, that does a lot of graphing and lets you visually display your data. So you can take thousands of pieces and bazillions of pieces of information and see it visually displayed real quickly. It's those kinds of tools, I think, that are going to let us take all that rich data that's out there and put it in a format that we can make decisions off of.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way. I think people are going to deal with it a lot of different ways, but I think that's one trend out there. There's a lot of cool startup companies doing things.
One of the things when we're looking at analytics, it really is knowing your audience. So if we're pulling data together and need to share it with a CFO, a financially minded person, what we're going to share with them is going to be different than with somebody who may be responsible for getting their employees back to work and keeping their workforce up and running. So making sure that the information that you're giving them and the analysis that you're completing is meaningful to your audience, to the persons you're providing that to. And then it's not so much, we all have the analysis by paralysis, whichever. Figure out, thank you.
Yeah.
My brain is in paralysis right now. But just making sure that you're covering those high-level pieces of information that are going to be most meaningful to them. You don't need to have all of that detail. Have that detail available if they have the questions, but keep it high-level and in a format with information that really is going to resonate with the person that you're providing it to.
And don't forget, interesting things about people who are in your audience, often your lawyers, are laboratory processors of information. About 75% of the world processes information visually, but about 90% of lawyers are auditory processors. And so when we ask, should we do a PowerPoint, they're like, can we please have it in Word times Roman?
And you're
saying summaries, huge thing. And then, even better, 5 minutes to sit down with them to just go through a high-level overview. That's where we bring that.
I think that's it. we'll leave you with one final lawyer stat from the calipers from Gillibrand, which was that 90% of lawyers are skeptical, and when you say that in retreats, they all agree. Kind of validates that. All right, guys, that's our program for today. Thank you very much.